Yeah, I've had him
Yeah.
on my show once. I don't think he's written a book under 800 pages, but the more the better, you know.
Oh yeah, this one is under 800 pages.
Oh, how many
yeah, this
pages?
it's 600. Oh no, so 738.
Oh, he's slacking off, I see.
Yeah.
Hello, Alan Ruhl from AlanRuhl.com here. I am joined by a special guest, Timothy Flanders. And we are, today, we're going to talk about the Catholic evangelization and outreach to Muslims, the current state of that. Timothy has been on before. I've had him to discuss his conversion story, and I've had him on for to discuss his book right here, The Introduction to the Holy Bible for Traditional Catholics. You can pick up a copy on Amazon. And he runs the website meaningofcatholic.com. And how are you today, Timothy?
Praise to Jesus Christ. Doing well, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good.
Excellent.
Things are warming up here in Canada. I'm
Oh
happy
yeah,
about that.
yeah, good.
Okay. So Timothy, you told me in your conversion story that you had spent some time in Egypt and actually for a while considered becoming um, a missionary in the Islamic world. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, I was a Protestant until 2010 when I became Orthodox. And so this was before I became Eastern Orthodox, that I did want to become a missionary to Muslims, Mohammedans, because from what I could tell, it seemed to be an area of mission work that was completely neglected by Christians. As a Protestant, I didn't know the history, more the Catholic history that we have, which is much more involved with the Mohammedans. But and not only are they neglected, but they are a particularly hard nut to crack in terms of conversions. And we could talk more about why that is. I think there's serious spiritual side to that, obviously, but also a philosophical side to that. And so I just was, I think, due to my own parents and my own upbringing, I had a love for Jesus Christ and a love for spreading the gospel
Amen.
and a love for the souls of Mohammedans, that they may not perish but have everlasting life, and
Amen.
that they may be baptized. And so I did a lot of studying of the religion of Islam, Mohammedanism, for years in high school, and I read through the Quran, and I read a lot of apologetic works and whatnot. And yeah, yeah,
The Quran.
yeah, there you go. And I studied Arabic in college, and then I got an opportunity through InterVarsity Christian Fellowship to go to Egypt on sort of a mission trip, basically. So we lived in the garbage slum of Muqattam in Cairo for 5 weeks after my sophomore year in high school and college, and then I went back again the next summer for 2 months. So I lived for a while in Egypt, and I spent time in a Muslim-dominated country, and that was part of me figuring out if I was kind of called to do that. And I had an experience there that sort of drew me to actually stay in America. And that's sort of not sort of here or there towards this particular question, but I met a lot of Mohammedans there. I spoke with them. I had a Mohammedan professor. I was at the American University of Cairo, so I had everybody's a Mohammedan there, except unless you See, in Egypt, if you have facial hair, you're a Muslim. So I shave my beard to a mustache. All the Christians wear mustaches, or they're just clean shaven. And all the Coptic Christians, they tattoo their infant children with the Coptic cross just from infancy.
I've seen that. I had a Coptic friend in high school, and he had the cross on there. It's interesting. So do the Coptic clergy there not have the beards then? If
Oh no, the clergy do. Yeah, I mean, but you can't
okay,
confuse
yeah,
a clergyman with a Mohammedan because he's got a black cassock on and he's got a black hat on that's like this oval, and he's carrying a cross. So every single Coptic priest is certainly recognizable as a Christian. So there's no confusion there. But
yeah,
no Christians wear beards.
yeah,
I mean, I'm sure there are somewhere,
but it's not the norm. Yeah.
right.
So I'm curious. The Muslims in Egypt, like I know that Egypt's a Muslim country, obviously. Um, is it known to be more liberal, more traditional? Like, I mean, it's more religious than Albania, but it's at the same time
Yeah.
probably not as religious as like Pakistan or something. So, like,
Well, Egypt. Well, yeah, Egypt has been on the forefront of liberal Islam for 100 years because I'm forgetting the name, but it was an Egyptian Mohammedan who actually proposed like Islamic monogamy 100 years ago, where he was arguing that the Quran is actually saying that you should marry one wife, and he was trying to reconcile that with the Western thought. And so, yeah, and I mean that comes out of a long influence of Western thought ideas in Egypt, since I mean Napoleon went to Egypt. I mean, people have been making contact with Egypt for some time. There was crusades in Egypt, but there has been a resurgence of a religiosity. Like 50 years ago, you would not see many women wearing the hijab, but now most women that you see, I would say, I would make the claim 99% really, you would see in Egypt, just in Cairo, would be wearing the hijab, or they're a Christian woman. Obviously, they don't wear the hijab. So
okay, so there's kind of like a way to distinguish the females as well if they're a Coptic or a Muslim.
yeah, I mean, in my experience in Egypt, and it's been 10 years since I've been there, and there was a political revolution since I was there as well.
Yeah,
So
that's
I mean,
true.
I don't
Yeah.
know how much things have changed since I was there, but there has been a strong upsurge in religiosity among the Egyptian Mohammedans. So there's a lot more religiosity there. I mean, you get them praying in the streets. You hear them muezzin doing the call to prayer every day,
Wow.
anywhere you are in Cairo, unless you're in like the Christian ghetto. So it's definitely very Muslim, but there's still a lot of westernizing, modern influences and stuff that the Muslim Brotherhood and others like them don't like those things, but they still are there. Egyptian TV, everybody knows Egyptian Arabic because of Egyptian TV. All the Arabs in the Arab world, they know, because the standard Arabic is very different than Egyptian Arabic. It's completely different. You know, like the dialects of Arabics are really completely different in everywhere you go in the Arab world. But everybody knows Egyptian Arabic because they watch Egyptian TV. And so that's an area where there's a lot more westernized influence is in TV, obviously. So, yeah, Egypt's kind of a mixed bag in that sense.
I'm curious. You said you had discern being a missionary to the Muslims back in your Protestant days, but have you heard of an apologist? He's like an American evangelical named Jay Smith.
No, I have not.
Okay, he's a very he does apologetics, and he's had done missionary work to the Muslims, and what called him to do that was he found out that only 2% of American missionaries were doing work in Muslim countries. You know, they mostly just go to South America and try to convert Catholics because they don't have to convince them who Jesus is, who the Bible's authoritative. they don't. It's not too hard to learn Spanish compared to like dialects like Arabic and Urdu and Turkish. But yeah, so 2%, and I'm assuming us Catholics aren't any better, if not even worse. I'd be shocked if it was as high as 2%. But yeah, no, the Catholic Church has a rich history of opposing the Muslims, both um, like militarily, like Crusades, Battle of Lepanto, but also academically. You got John of Damascus, Peter the Venerable, Francis of Assisi, Thomas Aquinas, Pius V. But now, in 2020, there seems to be like the last three popes, John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Francis, have been playing kind of cozy with the Muslims. Like we know, Pope Benedict prayed in a mosque, Francis prayed in a mosque, and then you have the infamous Abu Dhabi statement. So, tell us a bit about that.
Oh, there's a lot there. I wanted to quickly mention
Sure, sure.
Sayyid Qutb was an Egyptian Muslim, like as an example of Egypt. I mean, there's a strong, um, he was one of the founders of the Islamic movement, the Muslim Brotherhood, to basically re-evangelize their own people against all Western influences, especially Christianity. So that's, I mean, he was Egyptian. So, but to your point there, and I wanted to mention one person also before we talk about the popes, and that's Abuna Zechariah, who is a Coptic priest. Do you know Abuna Zechariah?
Oh yeah. Oh
Okay,
yeah.
okay. I was assuming you'd know who that was, but he is, and this gets into what we talk about here with the popes, is that he studied all the Quran, Hadith, Sunnah, everything, and he's able to refute these Mohammedans on so the famous moment was when he was on a live debate with in fact, Al Azhar, the Egyptian university in Cairo, Al Azhar, where the Imam came from who signed the Abu Dhabi statement. He was on a live debate with this guy from Al Azhar, and he was just pelting them with all these contradictions in the Hadith and whatnot. And then he just got up and left because he couldn't answer him anymore, because that's ultimately what happens with dialoguing or evangelizing a Mohammedan, is that ultimately it's sort of found out that their religion is not based on rationality.
Yeah.
And so there's a point where it just becomes violent, and it's either violent against human nature or actually literally violent. But so Abuna Zechariah had to flee for his life, and so he's in hiding somewhere in America, but he's able to broadcast, so Mohammedans can actually see his broadcast and whatnot. But this is where we get into the modern dialogue with Mohammedanism. So the dialogue, I mean, first of all, at its best, a dialogue is like the dialogue of Saint Justin Martyr, the dialogue with Trypho the Jew. So the word dialogue is okay because it's been used since Saint Justin and before. We got dialogues of Plato,
Mm-hmm.
But at best, it's basically a disputation where we're arguing over a religious point, like with a Jew or a Muslim. But the problem is when we try to explain Christianity to a Mohammedan, the very fundamentals of our faith are not only contradicted in the Quran, but the Quran actually tells lies about what Christianity even is. It says, the Christians say, this is quoting from, I may not be quoting exactly, but the Quran says that, quote, the Christians say that Jesus said, worship me and my mother as gods.
Yeah, that's at the end of Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5.
There we go. So that's an example of that's completely a lie. But if you tell a Muslim, well, that's actually not true. What we don't actually teach that. That's not Christianity. That would be blasphemy. Well, they would have a problem with that, obviously, because then you're challenging what their holy book says about our religion. And so then we got to get past that. And the Mohammedan faith, unless you're a Shia or unless you're a liberal Muslim, in general, the Mohammedans reject rationality as a means of truth. Many Muslims will believe that all truth comes from the Quran or from the Hadith. And so there's no science, for example, no scientific method, because everything has to come straight from their holy books. You can't actually use your reason to understand something. And that's something that happened in Muslim history when they specifically rejected the greatest Muslim since Muhammad was Al-Ghazali, who wrote a book called The Incoherence of the Philosophers, who rejected Greek philosophy as a method of just rational discourse. So it's embedded into their own religion to reject rationality. And so if you try to appeal to reason and you try to reason with them, like in St. Paul, it says in the book of Acts, St. Paul went into the synagogue and reasoned with them with the scriptures. And so he was able to reason with them. Well, with many Muslims, not all, obviously, there's a billion Muslims, are all different, but with many Muslims, an appeal to reason breaks down very quickly. And this is why the modern dialogue breaks down very quickly, because we start to point out something, or we even try to just explain, here's what Christianity really is. We don't actually worship Mary as a god. Well, that will be met with a show of force from a Muslim, typically, because it's not about appealing to reason. It's about abandoning your reason and submitting. That's what Islam is, submission. So there's a great naivete, especially with the history of Christian and Muslims relations. And that's what's so tragic about the Abu Dhabi statement and Pope Francis. I mean, it started way back with Evangelii Gaudium, where the Pope Francis said in that document that, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it said something to the effect of, the real interpretation of the Quran is completely peaceful. And there was a letter that was sent to Pope Francis, and this is what's so tragic, because there's a great deal of converts from Mohammedanism to the faith. They converted at the risk of their lives, because if you convert in most Muslim countries, you'll be killed. And they converted at the risk of their lives for Jesus Christ, because they knew the truth about Islam. And now that the Pope, the pontiff himself, is making these overtures that Mohammedanism is this religion of peace, and it's this great thing, and then he signs a document that says that God wills the plurality and diversity of religions. And there's this letter from these Muslim converts from Islam to Christianity, to Catholicism, and it protests this because it says, we did not convert because Islam was this religion of peace, and we did it with the risk of our lives. And here's what this religion really is. It's the spirit of Antichrist, and it is not a religion of peace. That's a risible assertion. And that's what's really sad. And that you had the famous, and his name is escaping me, I should have brought my notes here, but the Italian, and he was Egyptian, an Italian Egyptian, I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, who was baptized by Benedict XVI.
Yes. I don't know his name offhand.
I think it was Majdi or something, but he was converted, but then a few years into Pope Francis' pontificate, he left the faith. He was still a Christian, but he left the church, and because he was scandalized. And clearly, this is someone. I mean, no one should leave the faith, because you're risking your eternal salvation. But clearly, this is someone who needed to be strengthened in his faith. This is something that people who convert from this religion in particular, they need to intellectually and psychologically reject, and spiritually, most importantly, they need to reject this force of Islam, because it's a force. It is a violent force that's spiritual violence, first of all, and it can be physical violence as well. but it's something that they need to reject forcefully, just as we as Christians, maybe people who are born Christian, we reject temptations forcefully, but we need to, there's a certain amount of a militancy to reject violently the temptations of Islam. And when we're just giving all these overtures of, oh, we're all peace and we're all brothers and we're just going to make this Abrahamic house of faith, that's just destroying people's souls. And it's destroying, I think, that these converts, especially who have risked everything to adhere to Jesus Christ and accept baptism. And it's just spitting in their face. It is an absolute travesty, and it's a betrayal of Jesus Christ, betrayal of the gospel. I absolutely hate that.
Well,
I hate the Abu Dhabi statement. Go ahead.
So do but not just the. It's not just the ones who the apostates from Islam who became Catholic, who wrote that letter. But think it's every person in the last 1,400 years who has denounced Islam, has put their life in danger. Like in Spain, like there, you've heard of the martyrs of Cordoba.
Right.
They apostatized from Islam, and it cost them their head. They made it to heaven, but and yeah, no, it's just a shame. If you take a look at a lot of Muslim countries, they are former Catholic, like in Syria. I don't know if you've ever studied that, but in Syria, there was no. As soon as they took over, they take over shortly after Muhammad dies. They invade Syria, and for about 100 years, there's no conversion. So they're ruling this place that's all Christian, and the Muslim governor starts to get antsy. So he takes the Church of St. John, turns it into a mosque. This is where John the Baptist is buried. His remains are still there to this day, I do believe. And then you have, and then he imposes a huge tax burden on the Christian population. Then you find waves of conversion, because if you're like a nominal Christian, you're not gonna put up with a high tax rate. But yeah, and something I've noticed about these statements is that even though we're compromising, because I mean, let's face it, the number one scandal is the one true faith and a false faith doing this agreement. That's more than anything, that's the scandal. But there's not even good in it. There's no like condemnation of the LGBT movement or anything like that. We can't even get something good like that out of it. It's just, the plurality of religions, the protect the places of worship. There's the talk about maybe the Muslims in Turkey want to make the Hagia Sophia a mosque again. And then it says in this document that places of worship are supposed to be protected. Shouldn't they be petitioning them to give that back to the Christians? There's, I don't know. It just seems like nothing's accomplished out of this, and only the worst of it comes to surface. That's what I think. I don't know if you want to.
Absolutely. It's a complete repudiation of the gospel. I mean, St. Paul would be tearing his robes to hear these words. And I'm sure he is in heaven. He's tearing his robes as much as a member of the Church Triumphant can, because this is a complete repudiation. All the saints who have given their lives for Jesus Christ and shed their blood because they renounced Islam. I want to read this. This is the quote from that open letter. And so this is back in 2014 when they read this. And this says, quote, "In fact, as long as Islam wants us to be its enemies, we are, and all our protestations of friendship cannot change anything. As a proper antichrist, Islam exists only as an enemy of all. Quote, between us and you, there is enmity and hatred forever until you believe in Allah alone. Quran 64. For the Quran, Christians are only impurity. 9:28. The worst of creation. 98:6. All condemned to hell. 4:48. So Allah must exterminate them. 9:30. We must not be deceived by the Quranic verses deemed tolerant because they have all been repealed by the verse of the sword. 9:5. where the gospel proclaims the good news of Jesus' death and resurrection for the salvation of all, and the fulfillment of the covenant initiated by the Hebrews, Allah has nothing to offer but war and murder of the infidels in exchange for his paradise. They fight on the way of Allah, they kill and are killed. 9:11. We do not confuse Islam with Muslims, but if for you dialogue means the voice of peace, for Islam, it's the only other way to make war. Also, as it was in the face of Nazism and communism, naivete in the face of Islam is suicidal and very dangerous. How can you speak of peace and endorse Islam as you seem to do? And here's a quote from him from Rome. This is Pope Francis, January 20, 2014. Quote, to wring from our hearts the disease that plagues our lives, let those who are Christians do it with the Bible and those who are Muslims do it with the Quran, end quote. That the Pope seems to propose the Quran as a way of salvation, is that not cause for worry? Should we return to Islam, end quote. I mean, when you read this verse, it just breaks my heart because, I mean, these Christian souls who have risked everything and they're just burning for love of Jesus Christ. And they're just deeply scandalized and struggling to hear the pontiff say this nonsense and this toxic, this peace. This is example of when the prophet Jeremiah says, peace, peace, they say, when there is no peace. That's exactly what the Abu Dhabi statement is. Peace, peace, when there is no peace. There is no peace between Christianity and Islam. Go to, like you said, go to any Islamic majority country. How many Christians are able to freely preach the gospel and build churches?
Almost
so
none.
Even in Egypt, Egypt has 10 to 20% Christian. It has the highest population of Christians in any Muslim majority country. And they have fought for that for, 1400 years. And so, and they have to get a permit to build churches, and that's better than most. That's pretty much probably the best. They can get a permit and build a church. The largest church in the Middle East is in Cairo, St. Mark, which was an agreement in the 20th century with. They had some secularizing presidents in Egypt, which they were able to work with, who were more secular, because a lot of the leaders in the Middle East were imposed on them by Western powers. And so they were secularizing, and they were able to compromise with the Christians. But that's not the way it is in most countries. Saudi Arabia is a terrorist state. It crucifies people, cuts off their hands. You can't practice your religion in Saudi Arabia, even if you're on a U.S. military base. It's a terrorist state. It's all the ISIS followers go on the Hajj, they go to Saudi Arabia, and they want to spread Saudi Arabia Wahhabism everywhere they go. That's what all these extremist Muslims want to do. They want to imitate Saudi Arabia, and America is funding Saudi Arabia to continue to do what it's doing. And so in the midst of this, then we have this Abu Dhabi statement, which is just singing Kumbaya in the face of bloodshed. It is an absolute travesty, and it's a betrayal of Jesus Christ. So this type of thing, and who does it convert? Who gets converted from this?
Yeah, I don't know anyone who gets converted. I don't know, like, non-Catholics of all stripe, Muslims, secularists, some liberal Protestants, liberal Eastern Orthodox, tell me that, oh, I love your Pope. And I'm like, okay, but how many people is he actually converting? Like, Pope John Paul II, he had a lot of faults. I'm not going to try to excuse that. Like, he kissed the Quran, I would never do that. But as bad as that all is, he at least brought converts in. A lot of American Protestant pastors, converted under his pontificate. But I mean, who's converting under this pontificate? True, if someone does the research and figures out it's the true faith, they'll convert. So there have been converts since 2013. But like, who do you know that's at least converted because of Francis?
Yeah, that I actually converted. I came into communion with Rome 2 months after Pope Francis was elected. So I actually came in after he was elected. And I mean, at first, I liked Francis. I didn't really know much about the controversy. It didn't really quite come out in the open for some time, but he seemed to be caring for the poor, and that's a, he was caring for people, and that's obviously a good thing, very the mark of a Christian. But very soon after that, it began to be clear, and he is railing against proselytism over and over, and you certainly don't make converts by ostracizing converts themselves or discouraging conversion out altogether. I hope there are some that somehow see some good in him and are converted somewhere. I don't know who they are. Maybe there's some somewhere, but it's a very difficult situation and unfortunate. It's tragic, really.
And I do understand if Pope Francis wanted to be silent on the issue of Islam, because there are Christian minorities in Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, places like that. And if he comes out and says something very negative about Islam or Muhammad, it could cause riots and put their lives in danger. So I do understand if he adopted silence. I would understand that. But this Abu Dhabi statement and saying, fawning all over Islam like he did in, what's that encyclical?
Evangelium Gaudium.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know, boggles the mind.
Yeah, that's Evangelii Gaudium, actually. That's paragraphs 252 to 53. And exactly what you said we saw under Benedict XVI with the Regensburg Address. And he was making an address about faith and reason, and it exactly proved his point, which was so remarkable, was that he was talking about in that address, which is a very good one. That address is all about the relationship of faith to reason, and that's what really breaks down with Mohammedanism, because they reject reason. And he's talking about, he's just mentioning some 13th century dialogue that actually was a real dialogue between the Eastern Roman Emperor in Constantinople and Manuel a learned Turkish, Manuel, I think the second, Palaeologius, I believe. And he says that Muhammad just brought violence, and violence, spreading religion by violence, is against logos. It is against reason and rationality. It's irrational. It's just seeking force over appealing to reason. That's when we preach the gospel, we appeal to a man's reason, among other things. But the Mohammedan just appeals to force. And he was quoting this, and it provoked riots all over the world, which exactly proved his point. Because his point was that it's irrational violence. And then what did we see? We saw irrational violence all over the world. So it just exactly proved his point. But then I believe the Vatican just kind of walked that back and just groveled at the feet of Islam for that. I think that in my view, I think I mentioned this in my show a few weeks back. We were comparing the Jewish revolutionary spirit to the threat of Mohammedanism, and how the Jewish revolutionary spirit, with all its aggregate forces like Masonry and communism, and just sort of leftism and intersectionality, as they have Black Lives Matter and all that, as sort of one big force. Not necessarily all Jews are doing that, obviously, but it's the internal enemy in Christendom, which is causing revolution and destroying everything, and everything's disintegrating into just pure paganism. And then you have Mohammedanism, which is an outside force, which is an outside culture, which is continuing to spread. And to me, it seems to me that, when you look at Europe, you see that Islam is winning against both Christianity and the left, communist, whatever, because they're just laying down for the Mohammedans, and they're setting up the minarets, and they're hearing the call to prayer now in places like London and elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so they're just set. I mean, there's certain regions where they're just setting up Islamic Sharia in certain areas. And so they're just laying down for these people. to come in and set up their false religion that is the spirit of Antichrist, which denies Jesus Christ as the Son of God. And then Francis is then all about the migrants. And that's how all the Muslims are coming into to Europe and taking over in various areas. And God bless places like Poland or Hungary or other places that are a bit more stringent on that and understand the threat. But it seems to me that nothing will stand up against Islam except for one thing, and that is the full-blooded Catholicism of our forefathers. And that's the only thing that's ever been able to stop Islam and convert them en masse, like St. Vincent Ferrer converting thousands of Muslims and Jews. Saint Anthony of Padua being fired with zeal at the Franciscan martyrs, and he goes on a ship and wants to go die and be a martyr and bring the gospel to these Muslims. But the squishy Kumbaya church is just going to be destroyed by Islam. There's just nothing that can stand up against
it's going to
Islam.
be destroyed by pretty much everything. The fact that in South America, Catholics are converting to the worst of Protestantism. It's not even the best of Protestantism. It's the prosperity gospel, rock band, scream and shout that looks more like a rave than a church, right? That's the kind of, like, South American Catholics are converting to that. That's like and of course in China you got this hardcore secularism in China. We're losing to everything. This Kumbaya stuff is not going to win against anything. Now, it's certainly not going to win against Islam. And like the only, like, for example, I had an interview with Daria Little. Have you heard of this lady?
Oh, was that the? I believe so. Yeah, I believe I've heard of her.
Yeah. She's a Turk who's Catholic, and she chronicles her conversion story. And she's still trying to convert Turks and other Muslims online. And she told a story. I've got it on my interview with her, so if anyone watching this wants to see it, she talked about how a Turk now in Turkey you are legally allowed to convert. I mean, you'll become a social outcast. They'll think you're a CIA spy or something, but by law you're allowed to convert in Turkey. And apparently in Smyrna, a Turk who found out that Muhammad's a fraud and a false prophet goes to the Catholic Church, and he's like, "Oh, I want to convert," and the Catholic priest at the church says, "Oh, don't worry about converting, just be a good Muslim." And he ended up becoming a Protestant, which is obviously better than Muslim. But why is our clergy doing that? I mean, that's the spirit of Francis right there.
It's insane. I mean, my own wife tried to convert as well from Protestantism, and she was turned away by the priest as well and said, "You don't need to convert." So this is a serious problem, and it didn't begin with Francis, and it didn't begin with Vatican II either. There was squishy liberal priests and bishops happening even in the 19th century. So this existed before, and there's always been this pressure to conform. I mean, all the Protestant sects were started by Catholic priests. I mean, many of them at least. Yeah. But it also reminds me of the unfortunate. I mean, it's very unfortunate. I mean, I will make common cause with a Protestant in a Muslim country. I will make common cause with him. Because especially when I never forget when I spent 2 months in Egypt and I had a layover in Greece, and I had spent 2 months just hearing the call to prayer 5 times a day, and all day long, Islam. And then I was in Greece on a layover, and I was just going through a check, and I looked to my left, and I looked inside this airport terminal office, and there was an icon of the Theotokos, and it was like a big weight had lifted off of my chest, and I didn't even realize it. Didn't even realize that there was a strong spiritual pressure that was on me the whole time, just for 2 months. It was only 2 months. It's not even all our brethren have been living their whole lives under Islam, and I was just feeling the weight for 2 months. So it's really unbelievable So I mean, I will make common cause with a Protestant in a Muslim country for the name of Jesus Christ. Um, but one of the serious difficulties is, like you said, the Protestants are going to Catholic countries like South America and converting them to their errors. And what's even worse is what I saw in Egypt is when the Protestant converts come to Egypt and they try to convert the Muslims and they can't convert the Muslims. So then they go to Coptic Christians and they start converting them to their Protestant errors. And that is when that's just so sad, because then you have many of my friends who I knew a lot of Egyptian Protestants when I was there, and many of them had, like, either their parents were formerly Coptic or they were formerly Coptic, and they had the crosses and everything. And it was just so sad because just for viewers, if you don't know what the Coptic Church is, that is what's known as the Oriental Orthodox churches, which are particularly Ethiopia, Egypt, Armenia. There's a Syriac church, and they are not in communion with the Eastern Orthodox Church, and they're also not in communion with the Roman Catholic Church. There are groups of them in each one of these places which are Catholic. They've come over based on a bunch of Jesuits doing their job, but most of them are not in communion with Rome, but they're still all valid sacraments. They're Orthodox insofar as they do not condemn Rome and condemn Roman doctrines, but they're basically like Eastern Orthodox in the sense that they have 7 sacraments and valid orders and things like that. So they are our brethren, though schismatic, and we should bring them back into the fold, but they are not like Protestants at all. So when you have Protestants come in and convert these Copts away from their ancestral faith, it was just so sad for me to see that. And just the ignorance, just the same kind of Protestant bias gets transferred from these Western missionaries, and they teach the same Protestant biases to these Egyptians who grew up Coptic, but they didn't really get the faith from their church. And so then they embrace this Protestantism. It's just so sad. So it's that division among Christians. I would say, like, if there's any room for ecumenism, I'd say there is a room for some kind of ecumenical alliance in a Muslim country where Christians can at least band together to try to resist the oppression and resist Islam somehow. I can see that, but it is just so unfortunate when there's a division among Christians, especially in the face of an overwhelming enemy like that.
Yeah. So you said the American missionaries go there to convert the Muslims, but they don't convert. So they'll try to convert the Copts then, because they don't have to explain who Jesus is, who the Bible's authoritative, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, it's just it's the way where I was is a place called Muqattam, which is a bunch of Coptic farmers from Lower Egypt, which is actually southern Egypt. I'm sorry, it's called Upper Egypt, it's just upper in terms of altitude. And they're from Upper Egypt, and they came to the city and they created this garbage slum because all they could do was pick up garbage. And so they're known as the Zebulane, the garbage collectors. There's actually a documentary out there about them. I think it's called Garbage Dreams. It's about this place called Muqattam. And it's really quite remarkable because it's a very successful Christian ghetto, meaning that all the Christians are there. And then when you go in, they've carved all these beautiful carvings of Jesus and the Gospels into the rock face.
Wow. And
in fact, they have a saint who the story is that around the year 1000, there was a saint among them whose name was Saint Simon the Tanner. And he was challenged by a Muslim to actually move a mountain because he read the Gospels that if you have faith as a mustard seed, you can move a mountain. And so the Coptic Pope said, what are we going to do? And God showed him this man named Saint Simon the Tanner, who is this holy man. And so then he moved the mountain and converted a bunch of Mohammedans. So it's a great story.
So I'm curious, have you ever converted any Muslims?
I have not converted any Muslims, no.
Like I the reason I want to get into it, if you go online, that's true that globally American missionaries don't focus on Muslims, and most apologists don't either. But the ones that do, there's exceptions like Abu Zakaria, but most Muslims, apologetics to Muslims is done by Protestants. Now, usually it's doctrines we can agree with, that Jesus died on the cross, that he's the divine Son of God, but it's coming from a Protestant. So if they convert to any, uh, they're more likely to convert to the Protestant. That's what I wanted to uh, get into. For example, if you go to the Catholic Answers website, they'll have like a section on Islam, right? But like I don't think any of their apologists could debate any of the top Muslim apologists, not because they're not intelligent, but because they don't look, and these Muslims will throw stuff at them they haven't seen. Have you thought of doing Islamic apologetics at all, or?
I have not. My evangelism to Muslims has been mainly just person to person, people that I know and whatnot. And so I have not thought about doing it more online. I think it. I would. My passion is street evangelization. I do like street evangelization because it's. I think online is very limited because it's very difficult to communicate to people online. It's very difficult to not be taken out of context online. Online is just sort of this. There's a lot of limits to that, and especially with Mohammedans, where it's very difficult to even get your point across in the first place, just because of the nature of the debate. But I think that street evangelization has a lot more potential, in my view, because it's the just making contact with another human being and having that person-to-person contact and being able to preach to them the gospel. That's what I think. That's what me personally, I think I would be more drawn to that kind of engagement with Mohammedans, and which you can do in certain areas in America where there's a concentration of Muslims, or like Arab festivals and things like that, which you can do. And in theory, in America, I know you're in Canada, so maybe you can't do this at all in Canada, but in America, in theory, you can do that legally and you can't be prosecuted, but people still get prosecuted for doing that in America. But I think that there's a great deal of there you can make contact that way. However, on the other hand, here's the other thing though, is that there is a great potential for the internet because the fear of Muslims to look into Christianity is based on their neighbors who look at them, and if they found out that they converted, they'd be killed. Yeah. I met a guy on Facebook in India who had converted to Christianity, and he had not told his family. He was just living. He was continuing to live as a Muslim, and this is what many Muslims actually do who convert to Christianity, like in Saudi Arabia. They convert to Christianity and they continue to basically go to the mosque, but they believe in Jesus and they've basically converted. But if they go public, then they'll just be immediately killed. So we can maybe agree or disagree about their methods, but we need to understand, obviously, they're trying to do their best here as a convert. But I think that there is a lot of potential with the online stuff because, especially if you're debating a Muslim, you're probably not going to convince this apologist, but all the audience is watching. And the audience is filled with more Muslims who are perhaps curious, and especially in Muslim countries where they only have access to Christianity is on the internet or on TV. And they, especially on the internet, they're able to do it secretly, that nobody else will know. They can kind of safely look into Christianity. So there is a great potential there for a great number of converts be able, particularly in the Arab world. So me personally, though, this is kind of like Eastern Orthodoxy. I have not, with the apostolate of Meaning of Catholic, I have focused mainly on other Catholics. That's kind of what it's, our audience is other Catholics. And obviously, if anybody wants to talk to me who's not a Catholic, we'll talk and we'll evangelize anybody. But it's mainly about helping Catholics get through this insane crisis. So, I mean, at this time, I think maybe in the future, I would be interested in that in the future, potentially. But that's where I'm at right now.
You speak Arabic, so that would be a big help. Like I literally know no Arabic at all. You could put the word Muhammad in front of me in Arabic, and I wouldn't be able to read it. But I've read the Quran.
Well, my Arabic's very limited. I don't.
Oh, okay.
I've lost most of it, but yeah, I perhaps in the future, God willing, I don't know, become a patron of Meeting of Catholics, so we have more money to actually expand our ministry.
I hope all my viewers are listening to this. Look into Meeting of Catholic, become a patron, and I think some patrons get a free copy or of the PDF of this book. Right?
Yeah, you do get an ebook. You get the ebook for intro to the Bible, and you also get an ebook. Depending on your tier, you get an ebook of Kennedy Hall's book, Terror of Demons, or a print copy if you're higher tier. But yeah, I don't mean to plug myself here. I guess we've got it going on, but yeah. So I think that I could do that in the future potentially. Yeah, who knows?
Now, just to sidetrack a second, Kennedy Hall, who also writes on your website, he came out with that book, The Terror of Demons. That's about. Just tell us a bit about that.
Oh yeah, excellent. Everyone needs to go get this book. It is an excellent book. It's called Terror of Demons: Reclaiming Traditional Catholic Masculinity. And Kennedy is a great writer. I'm very happy to publish his book on our press, which is Our Lady of Victory Press. And it's all about reclaiming Catholic masculinity. And that's really kind of what we need against Islam and against the left is Catholic men of God. And that's really our problem, is that the men who have led us, and to be fair, it didn't start with the clergy, it started with our fathers who raised men who were effeminate because they were not willing to fight against all the forces coming against us. And so this book is an incredible book. It's very packed to the punch. It's a short book. It's an easy read, but it will change your life. If you're a man, you're a young man, you're trying to overcome your effeminacy or whatever, or you are working on, you want to be a man for your wife, or you want to marry a woman and be a man for her. This is the book that you need to get your masculinity in order, become a man of God, so you can be the man that your wife needs, that your children need, that this world needs. So, and also women, read this book. This is what you've been waiting for, that you want out of your men. And so this book, I really love it. I've read it twice. Challenging me. We've got also a series at Meeting of Catholic all about continuing to have this discussion about masculinity and being a Catholic man of God. So, Terror of Demons.
Yeah, no, I'm certainly going to get that up. I'm going to invite Kennedy here on allanruhl.com to give an interview. He's from Canada, right? I've never talked to him myself.
He's in Ontario, Hamilton, Ontario.
Okay,
that's where he's at. I think it's like 50 miles outside Toronto, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
Are you kilometers actually, not miles? What am I thinking?
Yeah, we like our kilometers here in Canada. I know you don't like them south of the border, but by the way, the border is apparently the closing has been extended to July 21. I can't go down for the 4th this year, so I'm pretty disappointed about that.
You celebrate the 4th of July in Vancouver?
Oh no, I went down to Great Falls, Montana to.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's fun.
Yeah,
I didn't know you celebrated the independence of the United States in Canada.
I just wanted to see fireworks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm like Great Falls, Montana. Like that's like the largest fireworks I've seen in the world. Like it beats, because Canada Day is only a few days prior.
And that's really? I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. So it's the and yeah, so that's 1st of July. So it's technically like our equivalent of the 4th, but like the amount of fireworks are nowhere near. It's like 1%. I'm not even joking of the stuff I saw in Great Falls. But yeah, so that's yeah. So I'm a bit disappointed in that, but I'll just go down in September and just hang around. I love driving down the States, seeing you guys every now and then, because 90% of the Canadian population is actually lives within 1 or 2 hours of the border.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. I've heard that.
yeah, but for me, like, there's no major cities anywhere close to me. I got like Montana and Idaho, North Dakota. Not knocking those places, but there's like no major cities there. Like, it's like a 20-hour drive to Denver, Colorado, or just as far to like Seattle. I could go see Chaz, maybe see how Chaz is doing.
Yeah, check out Chaz. Check up on those kids.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, no, that I do have a feeling that his book would help become the kind of Catholic you need to help convert the Muslims. Because something I've noticed with the Muslims, they respect strength. They like if you come at them with strength, they'll respect that, and don't worry about like being disrespectful. I think you don't get that from a Western Muslim, in my opinion. But like I've heard Eastern Muslims in Muslim countries, if you show them force, like come at them forcefully, they'll respect that a lot more than just the kind of Christianity that we have here. It's pretty sad. So I got a question, and it's purely hypothetical. And the question is, you, Timothy Flanders, if you could have one Muslim country become Catholic, what would you pick?
Oh man, that's a great question. I would say Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia is the epicenter of Islam. It has Mecca and Medina. That's where all Muslims go. They're bound to go to Mecca once in their life as part of, I mean, at least, I don't know. Shia have the same 5 pillars as Sunni? I don't actually know for sure.
I
But
don't know a lot about Shia. Like
yeah,
they got entirely different
yeah, it's
hadith
totally different.
collections and entirely different imams and
Anyways, yeah. So, anyhow, yeah, if Saudi Arabia, that would be the real. If the USA was serious about the war on terror, they would break off all diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia is funding the whole thing through Saudi Arabian money and with imitation of what Saudi Arabia is. So I would say Saudi Arabia converts to the faith. That would be the one I would choose because that'd be the epicenter.
in Canada, we cut ties with Saudi Arabia a couple of years back. We sent all their students home. Their ambassador went back, but like it's Canada.
Wow.
Canada has no like if the state sneezes, Canada catches a cold. If Canada sneezes, no one knows, no one cares. Like we're just this outpost up north, as Robin Williams said, a loft apartment over a really great party.
Well, that's good news about Canada, though. Good.
Yeah, Trudeau of all people, essentially the one good thing he did.
Wow.
But
Okay.
yeah, but yeah, no. Hopefully one day Saudi will become Catholic. I kind of, me, if I had to pick, I would pick the Republic of Turkey, because Turkey, when you think about it, has done, of all the countries, of all the Muslim countries, that country is not the Republic of Turkey, but the Turks as a people have done so much damage to the Catholic faith, like Christianity in general, but like take a look at, if you go back 1,000 years ago, like there wasn't a Turk in Anatolia. Then you had the Battle of Manzikert, and then the Crusades were called as a response to the Turks, not the Arabs. The Arabs had like a century of jihad, and then they were essentially finished. They couldn't do jihad after that. But The Turks did like 700 years of jihad. It's impressive when you think about it, but they've done so much damage to the faith. In fact, Saint Isaac Jogues, the famous Jesuit saint, he's part of the North American Martyrs. He actually wanted, back when he was in seminary, he wanted to go to Constantinople to convert the Turks. That's what he wanted to do. But he wound up getting assigned to North America.
I knew I loved St. Isaac. I love that guy.
He's a good guy. I got his biography somewhere there, but...
oh, yeah.
All right, well, that's pretty much it. Have you got any last words, Timothy?
Well, I want to recommend a really great book by Andrew Bizad. This is you should have Andrew Bizad on your show. He's far more fluent in Arabic than I ever have been, and he's got a master's degree in Islamic studies. So he wrote this book, which is called Lions of the Faith: Saints, Blesseds, and Heroes of the Catholic Faith in the Struggle with Islam. And it's basically a martyrology of all the saints who fought against Islam, converted as Muslims, or were converts themselves and martyrs. It's an awesome book, and it actually tells the story. Also, it's like a historical book, so he breaks it into these different periods. This is an excellent text. He was actually almost forced out of his master's program because he opposed Islam and he was critical of Islam. But this is the world we live in today. So, yeah, I want to recommend that if anybody's interested in digging more deeply. I also have two shows on the history of Mohammedanism on my channel, Meaning of Catholic, under the history playlist. We talk about, I have a show called Mary Against the Mohammedans, which just talks about all the different struggles I've kind of gone through. And we, learn why was September 11th the terrorist attack? That date has a special significance in history. So, yeah, check it out.
Okay, yeah, no, like those podcasts, and like you've got one about the Mongols, right?
Yeah, we go into the Mongols too. That's a big part of the story at a certain point. Yeah.
Yeah, because the Nestorian Church was essentially wiped out by the Mongols, or specifically by Tamerlane, who was one of the most evil men who ever lived. I mean, that guy's like takes his army. It's like you can either I'm gonna enslave your nation or kill you all. Pick, like he was. I had. There's a famous Muslim historian from Tunisia named Ibn Khaldun, and I think he actually had a conversation with Tamerlane toward the end of his life, because he died around the same time as Tamerlane, and so that's kind of like the highlight of his book, the Muqaddimah, which is like a historical book. He describes Christianity in there, but he gets so much wrong. Like, he thinks First Clement is part of the Bible. I think he thought Arius was the Pope even. Like, he was like...
That's a big mistake.
yeah. I've got the book over there. I can't check the reference now, but like I wrote an article on allanruhl.com. So, okay, so yeah, that's all. Everyone go to meaningofcatholic.com, become a patron there, and you can watch more on his YouTube channel, Meaning of Catholic. It's just called Meaning of Catholic, right? Yeah,
I think the YouTube. Well, yeah, just search Meaning of Catholic on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember the name. Like, I go there all the time. I saw your recent interview on geocentrism there. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, right on.
yeah. I've got all of St. Genesis books there, and.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. But, all right. Well, thank you for coming on, and God bless, Timothy. Hang in there.
Yeah, you too, brother.